If you're a B2B business, a B2B tech company, or a B2B marketer, you're in the right place. Coming to you from Studio 26, this is the Interesting B2B Marketers podcast, bringing you interesting contemporary takes, industry tips, guest interviews, and true stories from B2B marketers in the trenches. Now, here's your host, Steve Goldhaber.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Studio 26. You are here at Interesting B2B Marketers, and today I'm really excited to have Maneesh on the show. Give a quick introduction of yourself. Tell us a bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Steve, for having me here. So I currently run my own marketing and PR advisory firm. It's called Rave Marketing Partners. And before that, I have many years of experience building and running marketing teams and organizations in Asia and the Pacific.
That's right. And you and I worked together in a former life. So that's how we know each other. We were on many different global phone calls trying to figure out, am I waking up early or are you waking up early? It's the struggle of being a global marketer, right? All right. So we are going to open up with some case studies as always. And the first one you're going to share with us has to do with a company who they did a great job of having brand awareness in a market, but the lack of understanding was the next challenge. So you're going to walk us through how do you take that environment and ultimately succeed in it. So go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, sure. So as you said, the company when I joined the company, based on some of the surveys they did, speaking with their clients and prospects, what they realized was the brand awareness and brand recall enjoyed by them was pretty high. But when they really started asking their clients and prospects some more questions around what do they do, what do they actually stand for, the results were pretty astonishing. What we realized that time was that while brand awareness was pretty high, understanding of what the company stood for and the solutions they provided, and of course they provided a spectrum of solutions. That understanding of the solutions was pretty low in the market. So working with our global leadership team, what we decided in this part of the world, and I call that framework the 3C model of marketing, we decided that we are going to plan and execute on 3 Cs. So the first C is all about content, which was rich with commercial insights. We clearly made a decision that we'll be investing in building content, we'll be investing in creating insights, and really using the power of those insights to both inform as well as challenge our clients to think differently about their businesses and really inspire them to scale the limits they might have placed on themselves. So that was the first C. The second C, which again I'm very passionate about, is having the right capability or skill sets in the team. So we started hiring people, and I think there was the first time in this part of the world, we hired somebody who came from a journalistic background, who had great writing skills, great content production skills. So we got them on board, and then slowly we started building teams with a clear focus on having that storytelling ability. The third C was all about having campaigns in place. So clearly we realized that having content and investing in creating great content is not enough. You need to really be distributing that content or amplifying that content to really engage with your audiences effectively so that you really start having conversations with them. So for that to happen, we put in place a series of campaigns, very well thought out and planned much in advance. And we made sure that we are executing integrated campaigns, which is then using this great content we created and amplifying them through various channels. So basically, campaign in our scheme of things was a combination of various content assets and multiple channels, which we then used to amplify that content.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then we also realized that while this 3C model would definitely be helpful, we need to be having the right metrics in place so that when we have a conversation with our business leaders, it's not based on feelings, it's supported by data, right? So we had specific metrics in relation to leads and in relation to share of voice, in relation to social media, what kind of followers which we will be targeting. So as a result of all of this is a combination of having the 3C model and then really supported by metrics and making sure that marketers are going after commercial outcomes and not just busy doing activities and doing busy work. When we started kind of measuring our results over the course of the year, our share of the voice, which was actually languishing in relation to our traditional competitors at 30%, we went to 55%. Our leads, we were hardly tracking, which were coming through our website. In the past, there was a stage where when we were actually touching 100 leads per quarter. Our favorability scores, when we did our surveys, talking to our prospects and clients, it was actually around 50s in the beginning. It actually touched 70s. LinkedIn followers of our company page, that increased by 20% every quarter. Organic search in relation to some of the keywords which we had in relation to our brand, that also increased by 20% every quarter. So I think on the back of then this 3C model and then the ability to track that metrics really helped us drive commercial outcomes and also elevated the position of the team in the eyes of our business stakeholders.
Yeah, that's a really good model. I think the capability C is interesting because what I've seen is a lot of people make that philosophical shift, right? They say, all right, marketing isn't just creating brochures. It's more. It's more heavy content. And so often business leadership, the non-marketers will say, hey, you have a marketing team already. Just have them do different activities, which is very hard to do, to have a team creating content, whether that's writers, designers, animators. It's tough to do. So tell us about, did you encounter that typical friction? I mean, you did get to hire some people, so it went well, but what was the early stage in convincing people, no, this is a different approach. We have to staff it differently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I do remember that one of the first hires I made when I joined was a writer, right, with a journalistic background. But it took me at most 6 months to get my leadership team to agree to that, because in their mind, it was, you have marketers, so why do you really need a writer?
Yeah.
Right? So what I realized was, particularly in this part of the world, most marketers are generalists. They can create brochures, they can create flyers, they would be great executing events. But what I was looking for was people with great storytelling ability, somebody who can create a very compelling piece of content. It could be even 1,000-word opinion piece or a very punchy social media post. And what I found was it was very, very difficult to find those skill sets in the traditional pool of marketers we had inside our company as well as even outside in Asia. So what we therefore really did was even went down to creating job descriptions, which were very, very focused around really looking out and selecting people with the right storytelling abilities, people with this journalistic backgrounds who had actually created content, who actually did writing for a living, right? Yeah. They were not marketers who, by the way, did writing. They were actually, they did writing 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So as I said, it took me 6 months, and then I was fortunate that the leadership team agreed to approve that headcount, and once they came on board, we were so successful with that hire, and of course they did a great job of creating content and really starting new conversations. We were able to get another headcount after a year or so.
Yeah.
So yes, initially it was difficult because it was a mindset shift. But I think once we were able to kind of, that first person who came on board, it was kind of a pilot program, pilot.
Yeah.
I always believe in the power of pilots. So get a small budget in first, show results, and then get in more budget and headcount.
Yeah, and I feel like I've been in that same position before, and when you hire that first person, it's so critical because they still are not convinced that you need it, and you have to hire someone who is so good so that when they see the content, they're like, "Oh my God, now we know what we've been missing." And I've seen it in so many B2B organizations. It's the conversation is something like, "Well, we're not gonna say we don't need designers. Clearly, we need designers because they have skill sets in graphic design that you can't do. No one expects anyone to do that." But there is always that feeling that, well, no, if you're in marketing for a B2B company, you should be a great writer. And if you're not a great writer, what are you doing? It's fascinating. I feel like we're many times beyond that conversation now. I think 10 years ago, it was an uphill battle. You had to be an innovator in this space to have that lack of resistance. But anyway, it's still out there. Any final thoughts on the first case study before we jump into number two?
Yeah, no, I think this is good. And I'll have another case study where I'll provide probably some more color around current content creation and how it benefited us.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, let's just jump into it. So this one's about, this involves a little bit of media relations and some other things. So let's jump into case study number two.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the company I joined, what I realized was they had great set of subject matter experts, but they were not getting featured in the media at all, right? We were not even doing any proactive media outreach. So what then we did was, and again, as you probably know by now, I'm a great believer in models. So I put in a model in place in relation to external communications and media relations in particular. So the first pillar of that model was all about creating capability narrative. And capability narrative is all about creating a narrative around the expertise your subject matter experts have, the commercial insights which they can share to really inspire audiences to think differently about their businesses. So it's not just informing what solutions we can provide to solve your pain points, but really inspiring your audiences to scale the limits which they might have placed on themselves, right? So that was my first pillar, which was building a capability narrative. The second pillar was all about what I call as building a character narrative. And character narrative is all about humanizing your brand. Mm-hmm. It's about really selecting some of your key leaders to profile in the media and really encourage them to share their personal stories, to really build that strong connection with your audiences. So I remember I had one of our global CEOs visiting Singapore, and we pitched him to the local media, to one of the leading local business publications, and they had a particular column which came in every Saturday, and which just featured only global CEOs, right? So we pitched him, and the CEO did a great job of actually sharing some personal anecdotes, even their aspirations and even some of their disappointments. And their aspiration was to be the first certified actuary from their part of the world, right?
Yep.
So they left their home country, they went overseas. As you know, you need to give a lot of exams to become an actuary. And by the time they gave these exams and they were a certified actuary, and they came back to their home country, started practicing, because that was their other dream they had, was they wanted to serve their country and be the first actuary. So they started serving the country. That was fine. But when the reporter asked them, but were you actually the first actuary? She said, no, by the time I passed, somebody else had already become one. And I was not number one, but I was number two, which was fine. So basically what the CEO did was they were able to share their personal side. They were able to share their aspirations, their dreams, their desires, but at the
Yeah.
same time, some of their disappointments, some of the goals which they were not able to achieve. And as a result of that, we were able to build a very strong connection, not only with the editor, but
Yeah.
also through the editor with our readers. And that's what I call building a character narrative,
Yeah.
right?
So let me ask you a question on that. I think I like what you're saying around humanizing and character development. It just better connects with people. I want to get your thoughts on how, especially, you're working with CEOs, global CEOs. How do you find, oftentimes marketing and PR teams, their mission is to build up the CEO as a very strong and powerful person. They have no weaknesses. They have no flaws. They are perfect. And, I get it. It's the traditional, they're the leader of the company. They're great at what they do. How do you get a person to be more vulnerable and that be a net positive thing, as opposed to just someone being perceived as like, well, we can't ever say I have a weakness or I'm not good at something, because that would be bad for the company. How do you work with leaders and get them to embrace that?
Yeah. So I think that's where some coaching comes in, right? So you need to have a separate conversation. So some CEOs get it, but there are some CEOs who need some more coaching. So that's where I think the CEOs love to understand things through models. And that's why I like to share my models with them.
Yeah.
and then also share some past success stories, in particularly in some bigger organization, or in most big organizations, there would be some business leaders who already get it. And if you've been able to show some success through this model,
Yep.
and share it with the other CEOs, I think they are much more open to it. And sometimes it's just taking baby steps. So they may not want to initially, or not comfortable sharing all of their personal aspects, but it could just be, okay, what was your favorite sport, right? In college. What were your hobbies? What you didn't like growing up? So
Yep.
things like that. It could just be taking baby steps. So it needs some coaching. And then, of course, the CEO, first of all, needs to be open about receiving coaching.
Yep.
But I think that's where I think the expertise of a media relations person comes in, and that's where you need to really show that you know your job, and then just demonstrate what you can achieve through the power of models.
Yep.
And I think most CEOs get it.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think humanizing is a good word, because there's some balance of, we don't need to do we've all seen the LinkedIn personal story that goes too far. Sometimes I even think they know how the algorithm works. So I am intentionally going to cross a line and be maybe emotional is not the good word, but just very dramatic in sharing something personal. Sometimes that's a very good and positive thing for someone to do that. Other times I think people say, well, I know if I do that, the engagement is really good and more people will see it. So I think I like the word humanizing for the CEOs, because it can be a personal story. It doesn't always have to be the classic hero journey where, here's my flaw and here's how I overcame it. All right, awesome. Anything else on this one that you want to share with us?
Yeah. So just the third pillar. So we talked about.
I jumped in between I broke the model. I have to apologize for breaking the model, Maneesh.
No problem. No problem. So the third pillar is all about networks, right? So you have built your narratives focusing on both capability and character, but then you need the right networks to amplify that narrative, right? So it's not only just editors and journalists, but you also need to be leveraging the personal brands and the social networks of your colleagues, because many of them do have big followings. So once your story has gotten published, I think the work hasn't stopped there for a media relations person. Now, I think you need to be thinking about an integrated campaign and making sure that your published stories are also getting amplified through your social media channels, not only through your company's page in LinkedIn, but also through the personal feeds of many of your colleagues who are already very active and have pretty sizable followership as well, which then makes sure that as a marketing organization, you are not the only team which is responsible for amplifying content. You're actually using the power of the personal networks of many of your colleagues, even outside marketing, to be amplifying your content, which then really, amplifies the reach of the content you have created. Yep. And as we know, if you've gotten published in a newspaper or your subject matter expert you've gotten them at a TV interview, as we know, a lot of people don't watch these media nowadays. So those of folks who have actually missed that particular published piece, you have an opportunity to engage with them through their published stories, through their social media feeds as well.
Yeah, I like the part. I mean, I'm a big believer in, taking that message and obviously broadcasting it through the brand channels because there's size and there's reach there. But the personal employee channels, I've seen 2 to 3 times better engagement on a personal channel than a brand channel. And when you set up these models to kind of feed the teams with content, I've helped clients just ghostwrite the content where, we're using a third-party software where we write the content, it's uploaded, and then employees can kind of shop content. And they say, oh, there's 10 posts I could do. These 2 look pretty good. It's free media, and more companies should embrace that because, again, it's more authentic conversations because it's coming from a person as opposed to a brand, and you're getting to people that you wouldn't normally get to. So it's good all around.
Yeah, exactly. And just to add to that, so I think as a result of all of that, we moved from a press release based PR model to really a very proactive media outreach model, which was really supported by commercial insights. And as a result of that approach, our subject matter experts got interviewed by Channel News Asia, which is the biggest channel here in this part of the world. But not only that, global channels like BBC, a lot of them have a Singapore bureau as well, CNBC. And sometimes our overseas CEOs were visiting this part of the world and they'd never seen the insides of a studio in their home countries. But as a result of our approach here, using this three pillar model around building narratives and building networks, they were able to get even interviewed by tier 1 channels. The other thing which I wanted to talk about was, again, in terms of the capability, right, which we touched upon earlier, and how people started really seeing the difference in terms of leaders. So when when our team members and content creators were having a 30-minute conversation with a business leader and a subject matter expert, and converting that 30-minute conversation like this into a 1,000-word opinion piece, and that was getting published under their byline, under the leader's byline, in some of the leading publications in this part of the world, they automatically started seeing value because their name was getting amplified. They didn't have in the past, either they didn't have the time or they didn't have the ability to really write, but through the marketing team's help, when they were able to get published and they were able to then engage with some of their senior business decision makers through media, through their opinion pieces, I think that really kind of solidified positioning in terms of having the right skill set, particularly around storytelling in the team.
Yep. That's a great story. I think it's so interesting. PR continues to be a good complement to marketing, but it is funny how I always look back at PR as the press release, right? There's the media relation side, and then there's the press release side. And that was very much the power of someone in PR and marketing, was like, you sent out that press release and you paid for it, and then you got coverage. And it's funny how everyone has access to do that right now. So many times there's just so much noise, like there's 1,000 press releases a day. I don't know if that's an
Yeah, yeah,
official stat, but there's got to
yeah,
be where it's just, you can send that out to anyone
yeah,
that you want.
yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I appreciate you sharing story number 2. We're going to jump now in.
So
Yeah, go ahead. You got something else.
yeah. So I just want to kind of wrap it up, the media relations part. So if you actually look at the funnel, right, the famous funnel, in relation to the customer journey. So in my funnel, it's very simple. You In relation to your audiences, you as a brand custodian would build reputation, you'll build engagement, and then you'll build demand, right? Reputation, engagement, or demand in relation to the firm which you represent. And what I've seen is particularly a lot of startups. I consult with a lot of startups. A lot of them they want to focus on the bottom of the funnel straight away, right?
Yep.
Which is the demand part of it, which is great. I get it because they are in a hurry to grow, right? And of course build their valuations and all of that. But I feel very passionate about not ignoring the top of the funnel, which is building reputation and engagement. And that's where your media relations comes in, right? Because that's where you build reputation through your media relations, through your commercial insights, through your opinion pieces. So if you straight away jump into building demand, there are high chances either it will take a lot of time to build demand, or you will be seen just as a commodity. There's no differentiator in the minds of your audiences, right, in relation to your brand. But if you've actually invested in building reputation and engagement in relation to your brand, there are higher chances that the demand generation engine is much, much, much stronger. And then once the client comes in and your sales team starts having conversation, you will end up probably spending lesser time talking about price because you already build your brand and and build your value.
Yeah, it's a great point. It is natural for people to start mid to lower funnel because that's where you have to grow your company through revenue. But even if you do that, someone who you capture in that low funnel is going to take a step back and say, all right, you've got my attention. You've served something to me that shows that I'm a buyer. But what do you stand for? What do you believe in? Where are you from? Like all those questions. So you have to be able to have those questions answered. But it is true, and I can relate to that. I'm in year 5 of running 26 characters, and year 1 and 2 was like, oh, I know I have to do top of funnel stuff, but like I have to generate revenue. So it's super tough. So it's one of those things where you have to kind of like, you have to take your own medicine as a marketer running your own business, because it's, and inherently it's the right thing to do, but it's always hard when the revenue is just as important. All right, awesome. So now we're gonna jump into getting to know more about you as a marketer, and you wrote a book. We'll get to that in a second, but I want to first start with your first job in marketing. Tell me about what that was.
Okay, so I started my career as a sales guy, right? I mean, I was basically a quota carrying salesman, and so I started my career in Mumbai. Then I moved to Singapore as a sales guy, and it so happened that time our the existing marketing manager quit, right? And so there was a vacancy, and so I raised my hand because what I felt I still feel very passionate about the role of marketer to drive commercial outcomes, right? In my mind, if a marketer is doing his or her job, it's easy for the sales guy to sell more, right? So coming from a sales background, that was my kind of worldview in relation to sales and marketing. So I raised my hand. I said, look, I mean, I want to get into marketing because I want my sales colleagues to be able to sell more. And that was with a company called Novell, headquartered in Utah. And ultimately it got bought over later by HP. And then, I think then it got sold off again. So I started my career marketing software solutions in the software infrastructure space. Then I moved to marketing software applications like CRM and enterprise resource planning, business applications, and all of that. And then after some time, I switched over to marketing professional services.
Yeah. Tell us about, so you're in your first marketing job. I love that you came from sales. I think that's great. When a marketer understands sales, they're at a huge advantage to help drive the business. What was it like then? Give us like, what were the channels that were being used? Technology was a whole different thing back then, right? So tell us what it was like.
Yeah. So I think that time, there was not much online happening. Online was just email marketing. A large part of my marketing budget was focused on doing events, right? Face-to-face events. Yeah. So face-to-face events, email marketing, and of course also investment in media relations and PR. So those were the three broad buckets, and of course you had websites and all of that, and search engine marketing was just starting. So we were kind of experimenting with them that time. But I just feel that I was just speaking at an event, moderating a discussion yesterday on event marketing, and looks like, at least in this part of the world, even after COVID, people still prefer face-to-face events. Nobody, at least in this part of the world, very few people are going back to webinars. I think a large part of marketing dollars are now being focused on doing marketing events, face-to-face events. And I think we can see that countries like Singapore and neighboring countries like Thailand and Malaysia and other countries, they're really attracting a lot of overseas companies trying to do offshore events in these locations.
Yep.
So I think that after that 2-year lull, I think the face-to-face events have really come back with a big bang.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. Yeah, I think marketers if there was a good outcome of COVID for marketers, it was this was their time to shine, using technology to kind of keep something happening because you couldn't do it in person. And it's very interesting, like that there wasn't really any technological breakthroughs during COVID. The technology was already there. All of a sudden, there just was a need. So that was also fascinating to see, as like that just helped drive the demand, because people, hey, we need to do some type of a webinar that can get a message out or tell a story. How do we do that? So all these platforms really started to shine during that. All right. What are some things lately that drive you nuts as a marketer? Whether it's like it could be anything, the technology side, the storytelling side. What are some things that you're like, oh my God, if I see another one of these, I can't handle it anymore?
So it's for me, it's people. It really drives me nuts if a marketer says I can't write. In my previous companies, I made sure that I gave them a writing test, and obviously a lot of them came, and we had limited headcount, so everybody had to do a lot of things, including writing. So I made sure that they at least know how to craft a sentence properly. Gave them writing tests. For me, it's a prerequisite. If you can't write, you are in a wrong profession, I think.
Yeah, that's a
Because
good one.
In this scheme, in the current scheme of things, I think you need, if you are a marketer, you have to be a storyteller, right? So you need to be able to tell stories, particularly in using the written word, whether it's a opinion. Maybe you can't write 1,000-word piece, but you should be able to draft a decent social media post,
Yep.
right? With using a storytelling. So it's not about my features and benefits of what we're trying to market. It's all about what insights can I share with you to inspire you to think differently about your businesses.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. It reminded me, my first job, I did an internship in 1996 at an ad agency. It was a big ad agency in Minneapolis. And there was probably 6 or 7 interns, and they brought in someone to talk about writing. And her whole point was, there's the writing of what we do externally. Like it appears in ads, but she's like, the real power is professionally for your development. And she pulled this stat, and she went and looked at like every promotion. She had this promotion data, and it was all about a question: why did this person get promoted? And you had to have like five 5 top reasons why they got promoted. And I think her data was number 1 or 2 would always be their ability to be a good communicator using written tools. And I remember hearing that and just being like, wow, that's pretty profound. At the time I was all about like, no, it's all about the idea. And as long as you have a good idea, it doesn't matter how it's documented. But looking back now, it's spot on. If you can't tell a good story or just communicate, then it's harder to get noticed. It's harder to get the things that you're looking to get, whether that's communicating an idea, getting a new, job.
Exactly. So yeah, exactly. So I think the vision I have about marketing is that a marketing organization should act like a media organization, and therefore marketers must think like journalists and act like publishers. And I think the good news is that we now have social media, right? So everybody can publish. We have the power to publish. And that's why there's all the more reason. I mean, if you to be able to utilize the social media tools we have in our disposal, we need to have writing skills. We need to have storytelling skills, because if you don't have that, then you're not really maximizing the opportunities you have in front of you.
Yep. All right. Speaking of writing, we're now going to segue into something that you and I have in common, which is we both have written a book. So if you have the book there, show us the cover. So obviously our audio listeners aren't looking at the cover, but if you're on YouTube or somewhere else, you can see the cover. So A New Marketer, tell us what, before you started the book, what was that light bulb moment where you're like, you know what, I got to write a book? How did it start?
Okay, so I read somewhere that if you really want to be a master in a subject, you should be you should be able to teach it, right? So if you teach something, then you learn more, you understand more, right? So I started with that was my primary objective, but my secondary objective was also a bit selfish, is to really I wanted to use the published book as a differentiator of my personal brand, right? Because as you know, a lot of people talk about writing books, that they dream about it, but not many people have the discipline to write it. I mean, you've written a book as well, and it's not writing a blog post which you can complete pretty quickly and publish it. Writing is a marathon. You need persistence. Not many people really have that persistence and discipline to write and publish a book. So I just wanted to use that as a differentiator as well, to stand out in the market vis-a-vis other marketing and communications leaders. And the third thing, which was basically a spin-off benefit, is I just learned a new industry. I mean, tomorrow because I self-published it, so I can even become a publisher if I want to, because I learned the whole ropes of publishing as I wrote and published my book.
It's true. I can relate to what you just said. I mean, I remember just making that decision, and you instantly, on day one of writing your book, you're an expert. Whether that's right or wrong, you're an expert. And you have that expert mindset to say, well, if I'm an expert, I'm writing a book, I have to create something interesting. It's a process that forced me to just evaluate my beliefs. Did I have good thoughts on anything? Are they bad? And for me, I'm really proud of the book I wrote, but it's a love-hate relationship, because you'll work on something for a day or 2 days and you'll be like, this is going nowhere. It doesn't make sense. And you abandon it. And that's a very healthy thing to do when you're writing a book. Tell me about your process. Like, how did you go through moments like that too? Maybe that was just unique to me. Maybe I'm the only one who was angry at my book at times.
Yeah, I think for me, it took me 3 years to write it. And what happened was that the marketer in me, I think, got very excited about marketing aspects of the book rather than the writing, right? So I started thinking about what should be my book title, what should be my cover, And I spent, I think, probably too much time thinking about it and researching the title and the cover and all of that. But then I gave myself a deadline and I said, I need to finish writing by so and so date. I religiously went into a public library, which is very close to my home. So after this was pre-COVID, so went to offices, came back after work. Instead of going home, I straight away went into the library, spent 2 hours there just writing, and just I switched my laptop off and then only came home after I'd written the specific number of pages I had targeted for the day. And what I realized was, it's all about dealing with resistance. In fact, I wrote a post just yesterday about dealing with resistance in LinkedIn. It's all about just starting. It could just be an outline, just whatever comes to your mind, just start typing and don't think about editing. Think about editing later, because because writing and editing are two different processes. And lot of times, some of us tend to mix that together. And if you start thinking about editing before writing, you will not be able to start, because then you start chasing perfection instead of chasing excellence, which is something which you can do right now if you start writing. And I think that's what I did. And then I think I went about it in a very professional way. I hired a developmental editor who read the whole through the whole manuscript after I completed it. And they said, okay, maybe this part you need to do some more research and maybe you need to fill in the gaps here a bit more. And then they just gave me some great nudges. And then I was able to do some more research and based on the research, then create some more content. And I think that's how I completed it. So I think that would be my advice to myself and to whoever is asking. If you want to write a book, just start and think about editing later.
My process after finishing the book was really appreciating that I looked at it as like ice sculpting, right? Like in your mind, you start with this vision of, well, if I'm going to chisel some ice and create something nice, what is it? And then that first time you sit down and write, it's still a block of ice. You're using different tools. And really, it took me, I would write, I would have maybe 2 or 3 rounds of me editing that. I had the luxury of an editor, right? So like I didn't even have to take it fully across the finish line. I had someone do the editing for me. But even for me to get it ready for the editor, it's a lot of work. There's the craft of how do you write well, and then there's also is this good? Like, are marketers going to think that this is going to help them? So it's this constant battle of quality of the content versus the style and the craft of writing. And that was very difficult for me, is because hopefully I'm a better marketer than I am a writer. And that's where you truly have an appreciation for people who are great at writing, not just marketers, just authors in general. Like, they can tell a story, but the craft of how they tell it is unreal. Like just, what may take me 10 minutes to do, they're like, I don't know, that's 2 minutes. Like that's amazing.